A life-or-death proposal, the alien woman begged to be his wife. The artificial lighting in Laboratory Module 6 flickered momentarily as Dr. Ethan Nash hunched over his microscope. The 36-year-old xenobiologist barely noticed, too engrossed in the cellular samples he'd been studying for the past 9 hours. Space Station Helios orbited the neutral zone between human and Turidian space, serving as both research facility and diplomatic outpost. Fascinating, he muttered, making another notation on his tablet. The alien cellular structure showed remarkable adaptive capabilities, changing its molecular composition in response to environmental stimuli. 3 years of studying Turidian biology, and he still found new surprises daily. The soft hiss of the laboratory door interrupted his concentration. Ethan didn't look up immediately, assuming it was one of his research assistants. "Leave the samples on the counter. I'll get to them after I finish this analysis." "I have not brought samples," came a melodic voice that definitely didn't belong to any human crew member. Ethan's head snapped up. Standing in his laboratory doorway was a Turidian female, tall and willowy with the characteristic opalescent skin that seemed to shimmer under the harsh laboratory lights. Her eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangle, were the deep purple color that marked the highest caste of her species. She wore the traditional flowing robes that obscured most of her form, but there was no hiding the slight tremor in her hands. "Ambassador Navina," Ethan said, standing quickly. "I wasn't informed you'd be visiting the research wing today." "This visit is not official," she replied, her translator implant giving her words a slight musical quality. "I have come on a matter of life and death. My life, specifically." Ethan gestured to a stool. "Please, sit down. Are you ill? I should call Medical Officer Singh." "No," Navina interrupted, moving closer but remaining standing. "What afflicts me cannot be treated by your medical staff. I require something only you can provide, Dr. Nash." A feeling of unease crept up Ethan's spine. In 3 years of diplomatic and scientific exchange with the Turidians, he'd never seen one of them appear so desperate. "I don't understand. What could I possibly—" "You must become my bonded mate," Navina stated flatly. "If you do not, I will die within 7 of your Earth days." Ethan stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "Your what?" "My bonded mate," she repeated, her central eye fixed intensely on his face while the other 2 scanned the laboratory. "What humans might call a husband, though the Turidian bond is far more profound." "Ambassador, with all due respect, this is highly inappropriate," Ethan said, trying to maintain his professional composure. "If this is some kind of cultural misunderstanding—" "There is no misunderstanding," Navina said, her voice growing firmer. "I have entered the final phase of Va-Loren. It is a biological imperative that affects females of my species once in our lifetime. Without forming a bond, my neural pathways will degrade until complete system failure." Ethan ran a hand through his dark hair, struggling to process what he was hearing. "But surely there are Turidian males who could." "No," she cut him off. "It must be you. My biology has already adapted to your specific genetic signature from the samples we exchanged during the preliminary research phase. The process has already begun." "That's impossible," Ethan said, though a chill ran through him as he recalled the cellular samples he'd provided as a control group when the diplomatic exchange began. "I never authorized the use of my genetic material for anything beyond basic comparative analysis." Navina's outer eyes blinked in sequence. "Intention is irrelevant to biology, Dr. Nash. The adaptation has occurred. You are the only compatible match now." "This has to be a joke," Ethan said, though the steady gaze of her 3 purple eyes told him it wasn't. "Or a test. Is Captain Peters aware of this?" "No one is aware," Navina said quietly. "I came directly to you because time is short. Already I feel the deterioration beginning." As if to emphasize her point, a visible tremor ran through her slender frame, and for a brief moment, her opalescent skin dimmed alarmingly. What exactly would this bonding entail? Ethan asked, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his shock. A neural and physiological linking, she explained. Permanent, but not limiting. We would share certain biological processes, emotional states, and sensory experiences. You would remain human, but more. Ethan shook his head. This is beyond anything in our diplomatic protocols or research agreements. I need to consult with. There is no time, Navina said, swaying slightly. And this must remain private. If my government learns of my condition, they will recall me immediately. The current trade negotiations would collapse. Ethan froze. The negotiations between humans and Turidians had been precarious for months. If they failed now, it could mean renewed tensions, possibly even military conflict. Why me? He asked finally. Of all the humans on this station, why choose me? Navina's 3 eyes focused on him with unsettling intensity. Because you alone have spent years trying to truly understand my species, not just study us. And because, she added, her voice dropping to barely a whisper, I have been watching you, Ethan Nash. If I must bond with a human to survive, I would choose no other. Before Ethan could respond, the laboratory door hissed open again, revealing Lieutenant Jada Wilson, head of station security. Dr. Nash, she said briskly, then paused when she saw Navina. Ambassador, we weren't informed you'd be visiting the research wing. A brief scientific consultation, Navina replied smoothly, though Ethan could see the effort it took her to maintain her composure. Lieutenant Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. I see. Well, Dr. Nash, Captain Peters has called an emergency meeting. All department heads are required to attend. Now? Ethan asked, glancing back at Navina. Immediately, Wilson confirmed. As Ethan gathered his tablet, Navina moved closer, her voice pitched for his ears alone. 7 days, Dr. Nash. After that, it will be too late. Lieutenant Jada Wilson's gaze lingered on Navina as they walked toward the command center. The security officer's dark eyes missed nothing, especially the subtle tremors in the ambassador's hands. Ambassador, are you feeling well? Wilson asked, her tone professional but tinged with suspicion. Perfectly adequate, Navina replied. Merely fatigued from extensive diplomatic communications. Ethan walked silently beside them, his mind racing. The gravity of Navina's ultimatum weighed heavily on him. 7 days. The thought echoed in his head like a countdown timer. The command center hummed with activity as they entered. Captain Valentina Peters stood at the central console, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp features. Her 20 years of military service showed in her bearing as she looked up at their approach. Dr. Nash, thank you for joining us promptly, she said, then nodded to Navina. Ambassador, I wasn't aware you'd be attending. I was consulting with Dr. Nash when Lieutenant Wilson collected him, Navina explained smoothly. If my presence is inappropriate. Not at all, Captain Peters replied. In fact, this concerns the Turidian delegation. The captain activated the central holographic display, showing a small fleet of ships approaching from the direction of Earth. We've received word that Undersecretary Hoffman is arriving with additional diplomatic personnel. Apparently, Earth's government believes the trade negotiations need supervision. Ethan noticed how Navina's central eye widened slightly, a sign of alarm in Turidians that most humans missed. When do they arrive? Navina asked, her voice perfectly controlled. 3 days, Captain Peters replied. I trust this won't complicate matters from your government's perspective. Not at all, Navina said. If you'll excuse me, I should inform my delegation. As she left, Ethan couldn't help noticing the increased difficulty in her movements. The deterioration was already progressing. Dr. Nash, a moment, Lieutenant Wilson said as the meeting concluded. She led him to a quiet corner. What was the ambassador really doing in your lab? Ethan hesitated. Scientific consultation, as she said. Wilson's eyes narrowed. In my experience, when people are being technically truthful, they're usually hiding something important. Jada, we've known each other for 2 years. Trust me when I say it's complicated. That's exactly what worries me, she replied. The last time things got complicated with the Teridians, we nearly had an interstellar incident. After leaving Wilson, Ethan headed straight to medical. He needed answers, and only one person might have them. Medical Officer Rohan Singh looked up from his terminal as Ethan entered. The Indian doctor's perpetually calm demeanor was one reason Ethan trusted him above most others on the station. Ethan, twice in 1 week. Either you're developing hypochondria or something interesting is happening. Rohan, what do you know about Teridian biology? Specifically something called VA-Loren? The doctor's expression shifted subtly. Where did you hear that term? Then you do know something, Ethan pressed. Singh sighed. It's not widely known outside Teridian medical circles. They've been quite secretive about certain aspects of their physiology. He lowered his voice. VA-Loren is a biological phase that affects their females. A kind of mating imperative. That can be fatal. Potentially, yes. Their neural pathways begin deteriorating without the formation of a bond. But why? The doctor's eyes widened. Has one of them entered VA-Loren here? On the station? Ethan nodded. Navina. And apparently I'm the only compatible match. Singh's normally composed features registered shock. That's unprecedented. Cross-species compatibility is theoretically possible but exceedingly rare. Are you certain? She seemed pretty convinced, Ethan replied. And she's showing symptoms, tremors, skin dimming. This complicates things considerably, Singh said. Especially with Earth's delegation arriving. If they discover a Teridian ambassador has biologically imprinted on a human scientist. What am I supposed to do, Rohan? Ethan asked desperately. She's talking about a permanent neural bond. The doctor placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. I can't tell you what to do. But I can confirm that VA-Loren is real, and it is fatal without intervention. Whatever you decide, you need to decide quickly. Ethan found Navina in the botanical garden, a space designed to house plant specimens from both human and Teridian worlds. She stood beside a luminescent blue fern, her 3-fingered hand hovering just above its glowing fronds. You've spoken to Dr. Singh, she said without turning. Her translator couldn't quite capture the melodic undertones of her native language, but there was unmistakable weariness in her voice. Yes, Ethan confirmed. He verified your condition. Yet you remain uncertain. She turned to face him, and Ethan was shocked by her appearance. The opalescent quality of her skin had dulled considerably, and the triangle of her eyes seemed uneven, the outer two struggling to focus. Navina, this is happening too fast, he said. You're asking me to commit to something permanent, something I barely understand. I understand your hesitation, she replied. But time is a luxury I no longer possess. A soft alert chimed on Ethan's tablet. Captain Peters is calling another meeting. We should continue this discussion later. Navina nodded, but as she took a step forward, her legs buckled. Ethan rushed forward, catching her before she hit the ground. You need medical attention, he insisted. No, she whispered. No one can know. The political implications would be devastating. Politics be damned, Ethan muttered, helping her to a bench. Your life is at stake. Her 3-fingered hand grasped his wrist with surprising strength. The negotiations are at stake. Peace between our worlds is at stake. Before Ethan could respond, his tablet chimed again, more urgently. Go, Navina urged. I will recover momentarily. Reluctantly, Ethan left her and hurried to the command center. Captain Peters stood with Lieutenant Wilson and a tall, stern-looking man Ethan didn't recognize. Dr. Nash, this is Commander Jerome Blake, Advanced Security for Undersecretary Hoffman, Captain Peters introduced. The commander nodded curtly. Doctor. I understand you've been working closely with the Teridian delegation on biological research. That's correct, Ethan replied cautiously. We have reason to believe there may be more to their interest in human biology than scientific curiosity, Blake stated. Intelligence suggests they're seeking biological adaptations that could give them military advantages. That's absurd, Ethan protested. The research has been completely transparent and focused on medical applications. Has it? Blake countered. We've received reports of unsanctioned genetic sampling. Ethan felt a chill. Had Navina's use of his genetic material been detected? Or was this something else entirely? Commander, Captain Peters interjected, Dr. Nash has been above reproach in his work here. These accusations need substantiation. The Undersecretary will provide all necessary evidence upon arrival, Blake replied. Until then, all collaborative research with the Teridians is suspended. After the meeting, Lieutenant Wilson pulled Ethan aside. You know something you're not saying, she stated flatly. Jada, I need your help, Ethan decided. But this has to stay between us for now. He explained Navina's condition and her claim about the bonding, careful to emphasize the potential diplomatic implications. This goes beyond protocol, Ethan, Wilson said when he finished. If Blake finds out. I know. But I can't just let her die, especially not if Commander Blake is right about tensions escalating. Wilson considered for a moment. I'll run interference with Blake's security team. Give you some space to figure this out. But Ethan, her expression grew serious, be careful. There's always more to Teridian motives than they initially reveal. Ethan found Navina in his quarters, collapsed on the floor. Her skin had lost almost all its luster, appearing gray and lifeless in patches. Without hesitation, he contacted Dr. Singh on a secure channel. Singh arrived quickly with a medical kit, his expression grim as he examined the ambassador. Her neural functions are degrading rapidly. She's much further along than I would have expected. Can you stabilize her? Ethan asked. Temporarily, Singh replied, administering a hypospray. But without the bond, she has perhaps 48 hours at most. As Singh left, promising to keep Navina's condition confidential, Ethan sat beside her on the bed where they'd moved her. Her eyes fluttered open, all three focusing on him with effort. Time grows short, she whispered. There's something I don't understand, Ethan said. Why risk everything, your position, the negotiations, your life, by coming to me instead of returning to your homeworld when you first felt the symptoms? Navina was silent for a moment. Because the bond I've formed with you is not accidental, Ethan Nash. I chose you. But you said your biology adapted to my genetic signature from the samples. A partial truth, she admitted. Va Loren allows for choice before adaptation begins. I chose you after our third collaborative research session, when you spoke of your theory that Teridians and humans share a distant evolutionary ancestor. You risked your life because of a scientific theory. I risked my life because you saw what no other human has, the fundamental connection between our species, Navina said. The current tensions exist because both sides refuse to acknowledge how similar we truly are. Ethan suddenly understood. The bond wouldn't just save your life. It would create biological proof of compatibility between our species. A living example of what could be, she confirmed. Far more powerful than any diplomatic argument. Commander Blake believes your people are seeking biological advantages against humans, Ethan told her. Is there any truth to that? Some factions within my government have such ambitions, Navina admitted. They are the same ones who would see the current negotiations fail. Lieutenant Wilson's voice came through Ethan's communicator. Nash, Blake's team is conducting surprise inspections of all research personnel quarters. They're heading your way now. Ethan looked at Navina, who had lapsed back into semi-consciousness. The decision could no longer be delayed. What do I need to do? He asked quietly. Her 3 eyes opened. Place your hands on either side of my face and open your mind to mine. The rest will happen naturally. As footsteps approached in the corridor outside, Ethan placed his hands gently on Navina's face. Her skin felt cool beneath his fingers. I consent to this bond, he whispered. The world exploded in light and sensation as their minds connected. Ethan gasped as memories, emotions, and thoughts that were not his own flooded his consciousness. He felt Navina's presence, curious, determined, and beneath it all, a profound respect and affection for him that took his breath away. When the doorway to his quarters slid open, revealing Commander Blake and 2 security officers, Ethan was sitting calmly beside a fully recovered Navina, her skin once again brilliantly opalescent. Commander, Ethan nodded. Is there something I can help you with? 3 days later, Ethan stood beside Navina as Undersecretary Hoffman's shuttle docked with Helios Station. The bond between them hummed with shared awareness, not intrusive, but comforting, like knowing you're not alone even in silence. You're nervous, Navina observed, her voice in his mind as clear as if she'd spoken aloud. Wouldn't you be? Ethan replied, still marveling at their ability to communicate this way. We're about to tell an Earth diplomat that I've formed an unprecedented biological bond with a Teridian ambassador. Captain Peters approached with Lieutenant Wilson. Dr. Nash, Ambassador, are you certain about this approach? Once revealed, there's no going back. We're certain, Captain, Navina confirmed. The bond between us proves what both our governments have refused to accept, that our species are fundamentally compatible. Commander Blake won't see it that way, Wilson warned. He's already building a case that you've been compromised, Ethan. Let him try, Ethan said with newfound confidence. The neural scans Dr. Singh performed confirmed that my mind remains my own, just expanded. The airlock opened, and Undersecretary Hoffman emerged, a tall, elegant woman with shrewd eyes that immediately assessed everyone present. Commander Blake stood at her side, his expression dark as he noticed Ethan and Navina standing together. Undersecretary, Captain Peters began formal introductions, but Hoffman waved them away. I understand there's been a significant development, she said, looking directly at Ethan and Navina. One that Commander Blake believes threatens Earth's security. With respect, Undersecretary, Ethan said, what's happened represents an opportunity, not a threat. Over the next hour, in the privacy of the conference room, Ethan and Navina explained everything, the VALRN, the bond, and its implications for human-Teridian relations. You expect me to believe this convenient biological imperative just happened to create a perfect diplomatic tool? Hoffman asked skeptically. Not convenient, Undersecretary. Providential, Navina replied. Throughout history, both our species have found that biology often accomplishes what politics cannot. Dr. Singh presented his findings. The bond has created measurable changes in Dr. Nash's neural pathways, but his personality and autonomy remain intact. More importantly, the connection appears to be facilitating unprecedented biological compatibility between our species. Meaning what, exactly? Hoffman pressed. Meaning, Singh said carefully, that where we once saw insurmountable biological differences between humans and Teridians, we now see potential for harmony. Commander Blake scoffed. This is precisely the kind of biological infiltration we feared. No, Commander, Ethan countered. This is precisely the kind of connection we should have been seeking all along. In the days that followed, as news of the bond spread throughout the station, Ethan and Navina became living proof of what cooperation between their species could achieve. Some, like Blake, remained suspicious, but many others, including, surprisingly, Undersecretary Hoffman, began to see possibilities where before they had only seen threats. One evening, as they stood watching the stars from the observation deck, Navina turned to Ethan. "Do you regret your choice?" Ethan considered the question, feeling through their bond that her concern was genuine. "No," he answered honestly. "It was sudden and unexpected, but now that we're here, I can't imagine a different path. Our bond has already changed the course of diplomatic relations," she said. "The research permissions that were granted today would have been unthinkable a week ago. And Blake's investigation?" "Officially closed this morning," came Lieutenant Wilson's voice as she joined them. "Hoffman overruled him. Apparently, she's more pragmatic than we gave her credit for." Wilson handed Ethan a data tablet. "Singh's latest findings. You might want to look at them privately." Later, alone in their quarters, Ethan and Navina reviewed the data together. According to Singh's research, their bond was continuing to evolve, creating new biological possibilities neither species had anticipated. "This changes everything," Ethan breathed, staring at the implications. Navina's 3 eyes met his gaze, all focused intently on him. "It is as I hoped. Not just survival, but evolution. You knew this might happen." "I suspected," she admitted. "The oldest Turidian texts speak of a time when our kind formed bonds with others unlike ourselves. The results were always transformative." Through their bond, Ethan felt her satisfaction, her hope, and beneath it all, a genuine affection that had grown beyond biological necessity. "So what happens now?" he asked. Navina took his hand, her 3 fingers intertwining with his 5 in a gesture that somehow felt perfectly natural. "Now, Ethan Nash, we show both our worlds what becomes possible when old barriers fall away." Outside their viewport, the stars shimmered, bearing witness to a new chapter in the story of 2 species who had found connection in the most unexpected of ways.